I think the future energy business model is going to be peer-to-peer exchange of electricity, transaction between consumers, because they will have their own storage and cars and photovoltaics, and complementing what's happening into the wholesale, but the wholesale becoming more and more marginal from a consumer point of view, because the consumer will become more and more energy independent.
Hello, That Tech Showers, and welcome to That Tech Show with me, Chris Adams, and Samuel Gregory, who will speak to you in just a moment. This is the show that reveals the magicians behind the magic that is everyday technology. So welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us once again. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm okay. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes, it is morning for us. I don't know when it's morning for you, listener. You might be listening to us at night. I don't know.
Good morning, good evening, and good night. That's what they say, isn't it?
Yeah, there we go. They've covered all the bases. So, so before we get into our nonsense, this week's show, we have Laurent Schmitt, who is the head of utilities and European developments at Decibel. So that's DCBEL for those of you who want to spell.
Or spell it correctly, rather.
We'll spell it correctly, yeah.
I think that's a play on words, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the modern way of doing things, isn't it? You've got to spell things out because all the domain names are taken now.
Exactly. Or add "-ify" on the end of something, or just remove letters.
.io, yes.
There you go. Laurent is a French Elon Musk of sorts, and we'll talk to him about his love for EVs and all things renewable energy. We'll be discussing Decibel's innovative home energy solution, which has the potential to solve the home energy crisis.
Yeah, so that's EVs, electric vehicles. I'm presuming we're going to spell it out again. I'm following a theme. So he'll be taking us on a journey, well, the journey of them bringing their North American solution to the UK and the European market. And so we'll get into all the operations of the startup, which has currently raised an impressive $50 million before it's even hit the metaphorical shelves.
Very good. So how are you doing this week, Chris? How has your week been since we last caught up?
Well, it's been eventful, actually, because obviously I think people might know now that I've got some kittens that have arrived. I've actually got 2 in the room right now, so if you hear some meowing, that is just going to be nonsense as they're introducing each other to themselves and, you know, play fighting and whatnot. They're doing very well integrating, but actually one of them has had to have a massive operation. So I've got a tiny, tiny kitten with like a 15 centimeter scar on her back. It's horrendous. It's the most awful thing I've ever seen. And it's cost me a bloody fortune as well.
Oh, there they are. You can hear them.
You get that, yeah.
What was the scar about?
She had a lump on her back, and I wasn't aware of this. I mean, I've gone through cats before, but this lump seems to be around the vaccine site, and cats can develop a vaccine site sarcoma. And so she had a test, and it came back as sort of semi-inconclusive, to the point where they recommend, we don't know what this other thing is that we've spotted in here alongside the inflammation, so you might as well whip it out and get it biopsied properly. So she's had exactly that done, because although it's extremely rare these days, you know, it's a cancer that can form as part of a vaccine. And I didn't know this, but some of the vaccines they do on like the leg, so that in the event that it turns into a cancer, they remove the leg. And I had no idea of this. It's horrendous.
Wow, this must be a new. Right, so when was the last time you had cats?
We had a break for 2 years.
2 years, but I mean, when they got vaccinated, how long ago was that?
Oh, that would have been years ago. We're talking like
10, 15?
I'm thinking 20.
Wow. Okay. So basically, advancements must have happened in the last 20 years.
Yeah. So apparently, it's extremely rare. I mean, all of the vets that I've spoken to have generally been practicing for like anywhere between 5 and 20 years. Have never really seen one in the UK. But these fellas were vaccinated in the United Arab Emirates. So although it's more popular in America to have vaccine site sarcomas, I don't know what it's like in the UAE. So that's my catch-up then.
The catch-up?
My catch-up, yeah. So anyway, Sam, so what have you been up to? There is a visual change I've noticed.
Oh, yes. The slug has been thrown amongst the trash. Translation, I got rid of my mustache.
Why have you gone for the change in mustache then? You spent like a month or 2 growing that. The listeners have been listening in to the mustache saga.
I've been hearing the ruffling of the mustache against the microphone's pop filter. Just like this light. No. I just got bored of it. So I got rid of it. So I've gone from a more rugged look now. I've got the stubble going on.
I'm disappointed you didn't decide to balance it out with a soul patch. I think going for the zapper would have been the ideal.
His is it consumes his entire bottom lip pretty much. I can't quite do that. My goatee is my strongest asset amongst my facial hair features.
I just like that it's your strongest asset in general.
Yeah. It's the only thing I've got going for me.
So is it coming back? What's the plan?
No. I just got rid of it. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
I'm free and single. I can do whatever I want. I can grow facial hair. I can not.
Any further updates other than the facial hair saga?
So it's been an eventful week for the company. I had a burst of inspiration to redo Jupiter in the Draft website. So it's not. I mean, the new website isn't out yet, but I just stayed up until the early hours of the morning redesigning the website, and I think I'm really excited about the new direction. I'm working with a sound designer to create a soundscape for the whole experience. I'm working with a 3D designer to create some 3D assets and elements for the website. I think it's going to be a really cool, immersive experience, but also a very simplified bit of messaging, because right now we are, I don't know whether anyone's ever gone onto the Jupiter Draft website, but we are trying to appeal to more larger organizations. And I think, you know what, we don't want to go for those larger organizations because they're too slow, too boring, and they don't inspire us. So I want to kind of work with small, medium companies who do want to be a bit more daring with their web-based activities. So anyway, regardless, simplified messaging, a more streamlined website, and a more immersive experience. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully launching that by the end of the month. There you go. I'm setting a date on it, which I hadn't done it until now, but I'm setting a date on it, end of the month.
You've told people now, and they might want to go and have a look. What's the URL for Jupiter the Giraffe? We should be telling the listeners.
Well, jupiterthedraft.com, but you can also go to jatg.co. That's the cool short version for people, or when I'm feeling too lazy to tell people the full URL. But anyway, that's been fun.
Very cool. Very cool. I think there is a certain sort of thing of inspiration, a shock of inspiration that comes at midnight for developers. I don't know. It does for me. I'm not sure about you.
Not for me. I just I need my sleep. Well, I'm an early riser. I go to bed early. I wake up really early. I've already been out for a run this morning at 7 o'clock, 7:30. So I like to wake up early and be productive that way. But
I was still coding at 1 o'clock. So anyway, we have Laurent Schmitt on the show, and it's a really great talk. So let's get into that.
Sure. So Decibel are a North American company who are bringing to market what they call a home energy station, which is a system that not only charges your electric vehicle, EV, using energy from the sun, but also allows you to feed that energy back into your home as a sort of portable battery.
Hang on, your home is a portable battery?
Into your home as a sort of portable battery.
Oh, so your car's a portable battery. That makes sense, because the home is not particularly portable.
It's not just yet, unless you live in a van. Their goal is to bring down the price of electricity and allow you listener, to obtain energy independence. It's a fantastic innovation, and we get into all that in the episode. So we'll let Laurent himself tell all. So here is Laurent Schmitt joining us from Paris, Mon Paris.
So my name is Laurent Schmitt. I'm the CEO of Decibel in Europe. So Decibel is a Canadian startup company which has been founded 5-6 years ago, and which has raised already several rounds of capital into the VC space in Northern America to develop, I would say, a new product which does not exist on the market yet, which is what we referred as an home energy station. So I'm going to explain what is the context of this development and why we think the UK in particular is a very interesting environment to roll out our product in the coming few months in the current context of the energy crisis in particular.
So what is that energy station, did you say? What type of energy station?
So it's an home energy station. So we use the term stations through various backgrounds. The first background is the reference to the charging station, the charging of an electrical vehicle. So here, what is really new is the bidirectionality of your charging. So you can charge and discharge into your home. So in a way, you can use your battery as a home storage, and I would say as a technology to optimize your home energy. And the other element of station is the renewable generation station, in the sense that it connects directly to solar PV on your roof, and it really maximizes the use of your solar PV for both charging your car, but also feed into the loads of your house. So it is really a new device which you install in your home, so typically close to the place where you charge, and which is going to manage the energy for you into your home environment, and which is going to basically take advantage of the renewable in the grid when it is available. So there is currently a lot of renewable available in the grids, such as wind during certain period of the day, but is also going to make sure that you do not take electricity from the grid when there is not much renewable in the grid, or the electricity is high from the grid. So in a way, it protects you from price spike of electricity seen onto the grid side.
So what actually is this device then? I mean, is it because it sounds like an awful lot. Actually, it sounds like you've got the solar power. I haven't got any of that. You've got to have a battery. I haven't got any of that. So is that what you're including in terms of the device, or is it the actual management unit to be able to control all of that?
It is really an integrated, I would say, solution. So we cover, of course, the IoT part, so the technology for doing home optimization from the software, and including embedding artificial intelligence for forecasting your photovoltaics, forecasting your home loads, and so on. So there is some element of digital layer into the box, but also very important, there is an element of power electronics, which allows to really convert DC to AC. So as you know, the photovoltaics in the home is supplying your current onto direct currents, as well as your car charging can charge on direct current. So it's doing a smart switching of AC and DC conversion to make sure basically you maximize the usage of your PV into your home environment, whether for charging or for managing your loads.
And so, how do you see this getting deployed in like the UK then, for example, if you're or at least in Europe? How are we going to be utilizing solar in the UK? Because I mean, I don't know if we're set up for that really just yet.
So we really see two main drivers for installing that equipment. The first one is the shift towards electrical vehicle. It is a very strong wave, as you heard, particularly in the UK, with this ban of thermal engines in cars after, let's say, 2025, 2030. So that means that we see a significant increase of electrical vehicle, generally speaking, in the UK as well as in the rest of Europe. And here the first question it raises is, how am I going to charge this vehicle, and how am I going to smartly charge this vehicle in charging them with renewable energy in priority, and avoiding basically carbon-related electricity, but also at the cheapest cost as possible. So that's one of the elements. So through homeowner wishing to buy an electrical vehicle and make best use of his electrical vehicle for driving, but also for managing his or her home loads. The second element, which we see in very parallel track, is the fast acceleration, really the acceleration of photovoltaics installation. And here it is simply related to the current energy crisis, where you buy now your electricity from your grid at a price which is, I would say, in the range of 32p without tax per kilowatt hour, or I would say 40p per kilowatt hour. Maybe it's not an amount which tells you much, but just as to give you an idea, it has increased by more than 20% in the last 3 months. And if you compare this to the average cost of producing PV in your home, it's in the range of 5 to 6p. So basically, whatever you can produce at the cost of 6p, you avoid buying it from the grid at, let's say, 40p. So there is an immediate case in bringing PV into your home, in consuming as much as you can of your loads with PV. So that is really and of course, when you bring the two together, you have the advantage of one side being able to charge with PV, but also charge at the cheapest possible when there is PV. And when there is no PV, making sure you charge during periods when the grid is filled with wind or as low cost of electricity.
Sorry, what's PV?
Photovoltaics. Sorry for the photovoltaics. So that is the photovoltaics which you install on your roof. And so this is basically average size is around 3 to 4 kilowatts. The advantage of photovoltaics in your home is that it is way cheaper to produce your own electricity. The disadvantage is that you produce the electricity at a time when you are very often not in the home. So it's typically producing during lunchtime. And so here the equation is to try to drive your loads and your consumption towards this period when the PV, when the photovoltaics or the sun is shining, to make sure that you consume during this time, and potentially you discharge your battery in the evening when you have less photovoltaics, less sun. So it is really this energy optimization which we aim doing, which will lower the cost of electricity to the consumer, lower the bills to the consumers.
With that then, are you, with your artificial intelligence system, are you able to efficiently sell that excess energy that someone might have back to the grid and potentially make money off of that?
That's a very good question. That's exactly, I would say, the next step of the solution is to also be able to interact with the grid and basically look at your supplier of electricity, being OVO, Octopus, or other supplier in the UK, basically buying you back excess of your electricity during periods which are meaningful for them. So these suppliers are not interested to buy this excess of electricity if there is, I would say, a low consumption in the grid. And of course, all of these suppliers would like to buy it in the evening during the peak time of electricity consumption. And so the interest of having this storage is to be able to resell them at the right time of the day. And of course, value it at a maximum price. So yeah, you're right. In a way, Decibel allows everyone to kind of trade its own electricity with the grid during period when the grid needs it.
At the moment, I think anyone who has this sort of a solution in Europe, and it may be different in Canada, the origin of the company, which I expect you'll enlighten us on. It seems like anyone who does have solar at home at the moment, and then has maybe extended that to include the charging for their electric car, maybe they've got something going on for reusing some of that energy within the home. It feels like that's a little bit more out of interest at the moment, because the price of investment to get to that difference in price, the 6p per kilowatt hour in comparison to the 40p per kilowatt hour that you mentioned before, there's a huge investment cost to get to that point, right? So, you know, because it's not just all of the equipment you've got to be able to make that solar energy useful, as you mentioned. It's the cost of the battery. It's the cost of the charger. I'd looked at the Tesla solar roof tiles as well when they started releasing that. Well, announced that we're going to release them, like 4 years ago or something now. We've still not seen a single one in the UK as far as I'm aware. You know, the cost of doing all of that seems, I was going to say through the roof, but that feels like too much of a pun. But let's roll with it anyway. But the cost seems extortionate. So are you still battling against that, or is this something that you're aiming to make this into more of a consumer unit? Because it seems very much like it's very high cost to investment at the moment, just for people who are interested.
Yeah. So it's a good question. So, and we cannot ignore that. Of course, it is an investment to install basically photovoltaics onto your roof, and especially when you add a battery to it. And that's what we would like to avoid precisely with Decibel, because we are making use of the car battery, I would say, as a battery unit to store and optimize your electricity self-consumption together with your PV. And that's how we think we can reduce this cost. Now, if you are looking today at an average cost of installing 4 kilowatt PV onto a roof in the UK, I think I would say in the range of £5,000 to £6,000, full installation done. That brings you back, I would say, saving on your bills in the current electricity price in the range between £1,000 to £1,800 per year.
But I suppose that's still quite a high cost investment, isn't it? I mean, I think Sam was mentioning as well that there's government subsidies for some of these products. But I mean, I've looked into I've done a home renovation relatively recently, and I've been looking into like alternative sources. I wanted to get like a ground sourced heat pump, for example. I have sort of provision for putting solar on my garage roof, but the cost has been astronomical, really, and the government subsidies have not really been there. They look like they're there on the surface, but they're not really in practicality. So I think there was one for the ground source heat pump where I think it was they would give you about $7,000 back over 5 or 10 years or something silly. But actually, you've got to put the capex investment up yourself, and I don't really know who has that capex available to them. You know, the average person having, $7,000 up front to be able to fund green energy. I mean, clearly this is the direction we're all going in, and it will happen. But I think it that capex investment is still pretty high. So I mean, is there something that you are doing actively at the moment to try and make that cheaper in comparison to the sort of existing things that you have to cobble together to get all of the functionality you're talking about?
Yeah, so we have done piece of the work into combining, I would say, 4 different boxes into one home energy station. And this reduces, I would say, out of our calculation, the installation cost as compared to, once again, a solar PV with battery by around 30%. And that's the first step. And then while the EVs is going to further deploy, we are also looking at having a smaller product, which then we are looking at a new financing approach in order to minimize the amount of upstream capex investments and go into model which are probably more like subscription model, and where the consumer would have, if the consumer is not interested into investing into the installation as part of his home installation, be able to kind of rent the associated equipment. So these are developments which we have in sight and in mind. I think what I would like to say here is the business case in the current energy crisis, and with the increases of prices observed onto the electricity supplied from the grid is really making it meaningful now. And I think that's what we also observe in the amount of installation, which have almost doubled this year as compared to previous year. Just a consequence, I would say, of this new pricing environment onto the kilowatt hours importing from the grids.
Yeah, I mean the energy crisis is becoming significantly worse. I mean, do you foresee that trend continuing, or is this a peak in your informed opinion?
So the few words about what are the background reasons of that. I think it's not so complicated at the end of the day. Our electricity in Europe and in the UK particularly is produced on the transmission wholesale side, mostly out of gas origin, a bit of nuke, and more and more renewable. And what we've seen over the periods of winter is that the renewable was rather lower than average. So we were lacking of a large amount of wind on that side. the restart of the economy after COVID has created, I would say, a crunch into basically supplying natural gas into Europe. A lot of political debate behind that in view of the position of Russia. We see it also in the current debate with Ukraine. Of course, where is Europe going to source its natural gas from in the coming years is a big question. Is this going to be imported from US and so on? And I would say as a result for consumer, we see the electricity price increasing. And on the top of that, we have also seen a significant increase of the cost of the carbon tax imposed onto generation produced from fossil fuel. And so all that makes that it has really significantly increased. I think it will still continue to increase, not to the scale of what we've been observing as the immediate post-COVID restart. But generally speaking, I would say the journey we are in for decarbonization is such that we'll pay the source of our electricity more and more when it is carbonized because of these carbon taxes, and potentially less and less when it is decarbonized. And here the question will be to make sure that we consume really during period when there is PV into homes, photovoltaics into homes, or wind into the grid. And here, when there will be wind into the grid, we'll see really interesting arbitrage to be done even by consumer. I want to say that what I've observed on prices over the last 6 months is not only this sharp increase of 20-30%, but also an increase in volatility, which has almost doubled, which sometimes make people scared. But in reality, if you have a storage unit, and if you have your own PV, and if you are able to smartly consume, volatility can be a good news because you can actually also consume during periods where the electricity is particularly low because you have excess of wind during this period. So yes, it is complexity. Yes, it is changing. But technology, as Decibel, is coming onto the market to basically be able to take advantage of this new environment. And without neglecting the carbon impact. Adding an EV and photovoltaics into a home is a significant step into the decarbonization. We estimate it's around 4 tons of CO2 saved per home per year. It's quite significant as compared. I don't know whether you have any indication of this type of measurement, but typically a home, I would say in Europe is average emissions is in the range of 14 to 20 tons of CO2 per year. We would like I would say to become net zero to be in the range of 2.5 tons. And if you make the sum of adding photovoltaics, so PV, adding heat pump and adding EV, you reach the 2.5 tons. So the good news in a way is that we have a solution on the ground existing, which is able to decarbonize. So, Chris, your point is right. The question is, how are we going to finance? How are we going to help maybe first energy poor people so that they can also take advantage of this? And here subsidies, I think, are important, but also a more wealthy population and make them aware that they can finance. There is finance and there is a business case for this technology now on the market. I'm talking here about photovoltaics. Maybe the case of a heat pump is a bit more difficult in a way, and the return is a bit longer than what I'm talking here.
I mean, I kind of get your point now. I suppose it's sort of democratization of energy. Really, I understand the reason you're calling it a home energy station.
Absolutely.
So, do you have any competitors to this at the moment? Are the other people that are looking to do this?
Sure. So the first competitor is Tesla and Tesla Powerwalls and Tesla Charger. What is a bit strange with Tesla is that they have been very, very limited in the way they integrate their product together. And Tesla does a lot of innovation on the car. I am a driver of Tesla, so I like the car itself. But the way it integrates with the rest of the home is really a strange situation. And Tesla is very firmly against using bidirectionality. So basically making use of your car battery for the purpose of storing your photovoltaics is really not a target for Tesla because they are aiming to sell a lot of Powerwall in parallel to the car. And you were also mentioning the tiles, which is also quite a strange situation where they did announce a lot about tiles and which did not materialize today on the market. There is no doubt. So here, what we want to offer in alternate to this solution is something which is much more integrated. So everything in one box, which minimize the amount of home storage which you need and maximize the usage of your car battery. So that's really the positioning which we want to have, which we think is more integrated and smarter than what Tesla is currently offering, which we think is today the market leader onto this specific topic.
So your product, does that include a battery as well, or not?
So it's an interesting question. So first, we did not want to include any because we wanted to be really maximizing the usage of the car battery. And then the first lessons which we learned from the existing pilot project, especially in the UK, which have done a lot of pilots. I think there is around 3,000 cars today running on the streets, going around in the streets and already being trying vehicle to grid functionality. And what we observed is actually there is various ways of using cars, and it's not systematic that the car is parked in your home when the solar is available. So it very much depends on how you use your car. So here, what we would like to do is bring a solution where we maximize the car battery usage, where we potentially had a second electrical car for maybe more local drive. And if required, and if we still lose energy in a way from photovoltaics, then we still have the option to add a battery. But we would like this to be the last option into that. And the battery could be leased, by the way, if we see that maybe as a starting point, we don't need, but we observe that at a certain stage it is needed, then our idea is to bring it as a complementary services to make sure that the homeowner does not lose the value of his photovoltaics.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I kind of expect that you would need a battery. I mean, if I was to take my situation, my car is from 1990, so its battery is very small. And as a result, that would be the one that would be parked in the garage. If I had an electric car, then, if in the normal circumstances where I'm not working from home, then my standard would have been that I would be out in the car. So it would definitely be missing the prime time. I mean, I suppose it's a little different now where people are working from home more and more, but that would probably still mean a day or two a week maybe where I would be missing out of the sun.
And so your case is very interesting because what we would do then naturally, if you would go to a supplier like Tesla, he would immediately try to push you a Powerwall of, let's say, £9,000 if you have capability to buy that and put and convince you and so on.
Well, I have to say actually on that point, I did speak to Tesla a couple of years ago when I was doing the renovation of my house, and they tried to push a Powerwall on me when I don't have an electric car and I didn't have I don't have any photovoltaic cells. So they was trying to push me a Powerwall anyway, and I was like, well, I don't know how, I don't know what I'm going to be doing with that.
No, that was not the sweet spot. But let's imagine you've got PV and you've got interest into going into PV. Then what we would do on our side is first, rather than pushing you a £9,000 Powerwall, what we would try to do is you can today get from a second-hand market, a Nissan Leaf as an example, which costs much less than that. And the first question would be, okay, why don't you look at maybe electrifying your second car, if you have a second car, which you use as a standalone battery, actually the same way as a Powerwall, and in a different way in the sense that, okay, I have a constraint on that second car that I don't drive during the peak time of PV. And it may be acceptable because you don't use this car as often. Of course, if you don't have space, if you are not interested and so on, then we can come and say, okay, we put you a 10 kilowatt equivalent of a Powerwall together with your EV, and then you can have something which is quite business as usual in a way as compared to what gets installed in terms of photovoltaics in a home.
I think that's really interesting because you're essentially saying that you can make better use of your battery because it isn't stuck to a wall. It has wheels and you can drive it around if you so wish.
That's exactly the point.
Of course, that is a much larger battery, sort of in terms of its physical space that it takes up. But
yes,
that's interesting, isn't it, as a concept?
What we've also observed, if I may add on to that, is of course the question on battery is how is this going to be recycled? How is this going to basically make sure that we don't scrap this quantity of batteries? And when we are exchanging with the car manufacturers, what we understand is not so easy to extract used battery from a car, and I would say to retrofit it into a Powerwall or an equivalent of a Powerwall. And here, what we say is, okay, so let's take a car maybe with a more limited autonomy, and use it in a different way, and that can be a way of having also a second life for these cars and batteries, and reduce the cost, as what you were saying. To your point before, reduce the capex required.
The only question I have as a follow-up to that, really, I suppose, is there a downside to the number of charging cycles that a car battery would go through, or or even coming to your car and finding that it's flat because you've been cooking a roast dinner?
So for sure you need some artificial intelligence and some forecasting algorithm to make sure that you charge and discharge in a smart manner. So first of all, the impact on the aging of the battery is secondary in terms of scale. When you charge and discharge, at the scale of, let's say, 5 kilowatts. And when you accelerate with an EV, you accelerate at a scale of 50 to 100 kilowatts. So you see basically the constraint which you put on your car battery on discharge and charge is way more when you are on the road and you accelerate or you brake than when you are using it into your home environment. So what I'm trying to say here is that the first experience we had with cars like the Nissan Leaf shows that the impact on the aging is really of a second scale, second element, and that is not really visible by the driver of the car. That's what is interesting. To your point as well, very important is if you are looking at the dedicated battery, you will store probably something in the range of 10, 20 kilowatt hours. Today, a car battery is at least 60, 80 kilowatt hours. So of course, if you use this battery on average, on my car, I use this battery on average 20 kilowatt hour every day. So you've got 40 kilowatt hours which you can use in being smart of managing your energy around. And my house, on average, consumes 15 kilowatt hour per day. So 14 kilowatt hour means I could potentially feed my home during 4 days. Just to be clear, I am not on heat pump. I am on gas heating. And so that's why I'm only consuming 15 kilowatt hour per day. But that gives you the kind of magnitude which this energy reservoir, which is now representing by EVs into the home environment.
So you mentioned before the call that it will be expanding in the UK and all the rest of it. And I'm looking outside right now and it's gloomy and not sunny. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on why the UK, you've obviously identified the UK as being a prime sort of target or showing some sort of interest. Why do you think that is, given that we barely have any sun? Is the efficiency there? Is there just an appetite to utilize what sun that we do have? Just your thoughts around that, where the interest has stemmed from in the UK.
Yeah, so the first real interest in the UK is the fact that the electricity prices are going very high. I think you pay your electricity the second highest in Europe. The first highest is Germany, and just behind is the UK. And what we see is that you have a certain threshold when the price per kilowatt hour is reached, where basically there is a trigger into consumer starting to find other sources, alternatives, and so on. So that's really the first drive of that element. The second element which you have in the UK is, I would say, a regulatory environment, which is quite dynamic. And I would say entities like Ofgem and DNOs, TSO, I would say National Grid are very much incentivized to develop innovation in what they say integrates consumer flexibility into the system. And that creates an environment where there is a lot of prototyping ongoing. And if you are looking today, UK is the country in the world which has deployed the largest vehicle to grid demonstration with what I was saying, I think over 3,000 cars in the streets. I would say to the credit, and that has nothing to do with Decibel, of entities like Kaluza, OVO, and Octopus Energy, as an example, who are really kind of leaders, or even Eon in other business case, leaders into prototyping a new environment. So what we see is this combination, I would say, makes the your product as the startup phase of this what we call energy revolution, democratization of energy, and which we think will become business as usual, we hope, in the next 2-3 years.
I mean, on the products as well, you mentioned DC, and I've it's only just sort of come to my attention, really. The DC is probably the more efficient way of actually charging the vehicle, right, rather than the AC, and how I suppose that's what enables the fast charging as well, right? So you're actually able to take advantage of, because you're doing the consumption locally. Is there an inverter? There's no inverter, I suppose, is it? It's going directly through, but you're able to have the inverter to make use of that within the home. Am I making sense to people here? I don't know. Maybe you can elaborate on that and explain what I'm sort of bumbling around.
Yeah. So basically the principle is very simple. Is every battery charge on DC. So the way of charging and discharging a battery, if you are on the poles of the battery, is a DC direct current supply. And for photovoltaics is the same. Every panel supply its electricity on the DC. So what you are doing right now in the current charging infrastructure is you convert DC to AC on one side, and you convert inside the car back AC to DC. So what Decibel does is jump DC to DC directly. And so that's where we save efficiency in avoiding one stage of conversion of DC to AC. So there is some efficiency gain here, which we think are in the range of 5-10%. But beyond the efficiency gain, you also enable further functionality. And the functionality is you can really manage the bidirectionality of charging and discharging with the car in an easier way. And you can also basically fast charge better into the home environment. And so if you would have, for instance, a battery together with your installation, you would be able to actually charge higher than what is your grid connection, taking advantage of what the battery itself is able to supply through your charging. So typically, rather than being in the 7 kilowatt type of charging in the home environment, our product can go as high as almost 15, 16 kilowatts in a home environment. So you charge twice faster. The question is whether it's needed. And to be honest, as an EV veteran, to be honest, it's not needed to go to 15 kilowatts. What is needed is, if you have two cars, is to make sure that you have the agility and flexibility to share this 15 kilowatt between the charging of your two cars. And that's where the DC is also much more flexible, much more agile in doing smart charging from one car to the others, and potentially discharging of one car into the other one. So I have myself decided to move into a full net zero lifestyle environment. So I have now 2 EVs. And of course, I have every day to decide which one should I charge, and given the tariff, given the available PV, and that becomes a calculation which is not an obvious one. And that's where the Decibel is expected to do it, I would say, transparently and in an automated way for the consumer, depending on how much kilometer or miles she or he wants to drive in the coming day with one or the second car.
Okay, so I mean, you said that Decibel is 6 years old, started as a Canadian company?
Yeah, the first 6 years we're only on doing R&D. We have really patented at least 5-6 key innovations. And so for the moment, just to be clear, we have not launched any product yet, and we plan to launch in the next 6 months.
So that's quite a lot of investment. I mean, how big is the company at this point?
We are today 60 employees. And again, we are venture capital backed. So we have raised around $50 million US so far. And this investment and fundraising has been made in view of the high potential of EV deployments, bidirectional EV deployments, as well as the new business model developing around solar PV self-consumption.
So you're the CEO for Europe then, right? So you've been around for how long in the company?
1 year and 2 months.
1 year, 2 months. Cool. So how does a company manage to raise $50 million and get to 60 employees in 6 years and not have a product?
It is a good question, and I think it is what we see happening right now into the electrical transportation side. And if you are looking like companies like Rivian or these very, very big companies are doing bets into the future with their new trucks and so on, and basically they develop really breakthrough innovation, which takes time. And I think there is a significant gap between having a prototype on the table and having something which can be manufactured to scales of millions. Our product has been designed to be manufactured as almost as a smartphone and scale up to millions when the market will be ready. And of course, to be able to do that, you need to invest upfront, and that's where I think the American market are good in being able to raise that kind of capital and so on.
And what do you have to sort of prove back to the investors for them to be happy to keep giving you money? I mean, is it the number of prototypes that are developed, or the number of prototypes in active use as well?
So they are definitely a very high scrutiny onto the phasing and the milestone of our developments. And so basically it goes through the early stage, I would say more around patents and basically proof of concepts. And I would say table prototyping, I would call it that way.
When you say table prototyping, what do you mean? Like, here is an example right here on the table.
Yes. And you see two cars, two electronic boards connecting with each other. And we inject here a current of DC and we get out another one. And we are able to produce basically a digital inverter, and which is going to be more cost efficient and more energy efficient than any inverter today on the market. That's going to be the starting point of our journey. Then, of course, we have now gone through this stage, and we are now in the stage of really what I would refer as the minimum viable product phase. And so we are at the phase of certifying this minimum viable product and manufacturing the first thousands in terms of scales, and launching these thousands into target markets, which are California and Europe, UK. And that's exactly where we are. So now we are into a milestone which are related to certification of the product, as well as deployment of few hundreds with happy customers and so on. So
how many do you actually have in the field at the moment that are being used for?
None.
None for even as a prototype?
No.
Wow.
No. As a prototype, we have them in labs, we have them in certification. And of course, we are really the first one to be as far as that on the US certification. And we know that there is, and the investor know that there is a significant step into going through this certification, which took us around 2 years, to be honest. So basically, we think we have around 2 years of advance, at least, ignoring all the patents, which we have also put to protect our IP.
So how many patents have you managed to procure over the last 6 years or so?
So we did, I think, put at least, I would say around 8-10 patents, which are really core around the power electronics.
Global patents, I presume.
Yes, definitely. And fully recognized. And so that's where really our technology building blocks have started. And also what is particular is we have decided to focus on the residential and home. So we have decided to deploy this technology first under the market of these homeowners, democratization of consumers, energy management, and all that kind of things, and which gives a certain profile to our potential market, as you can imagine.
So have there been a number of pivots along the way? I mean, did you start? Did the I mean, obviously you've got 14 months experience in this, but did the company start out trying to target the consumer, the home?
Yeah, so we have, of course, we have been going through different phases of testing the market, testing the marketing messages, going through the lesson learned from various pilot projects. And that's where we are. And we want to be a direct customer company. So that means we're going to market our product mostly digitally through the web. And what we've been developing quite thoroughly over the past few months is what we call a network of smart home installers, which will be able to deploy our product, which we want across the UK starting September. And we want to have a full UK coverage as close as possible as full UK coverage by September. So basically, whoever phones or logs their interest onto our website in September will be able to receive an offer and have, I would say, an installer identify to do the entire integration into the home environment.
So when did you say that you were expecting to do the first sort of installs then?
I would say large scale would be around September, and the first pilots would be between July and September.
I might be a potential pilot candidate for you there, Laurent.
With pleasure.
Do you have any buyers at the moment, or are you looking to actually put the product on sale?
Yes, so that's a good point. So we have started to do rounds of interviews like yours, and thank you for your interest of the product today, where we have already identified, and this usually triggers a lot of question and interest by potential buyers. So we ask them to log themselves onto our website as a potential reservation. And we have already, I would say, more than hundreds of reservations identified in the two targets markets in Europe, which are UK and France, but as well as around California and New York. So these are really the area where we want to start. This year for us the KPI is not about mass deployment, but about early adopter deployment phase. And so we would like to reach around 400, 500 users, if possible, within the end of the year, which we hope will be happy users and which will become advocate of our technologies while what it will further deploy. Through the deployment of our installer network, we've been very happy with the feedback received from a lot of these photovoltaic installers about the innovation around our product and around the need, because I think a lot of these installers realize that if you have a full-fledged installation, you have 5 different boxes across your wall doing all this conversion and all that kind of things, where ours is kind of a much more integrated and efficient solution moving forward. So we hear a lot of positive feedback from our installers. So we think the market is going to be quite good for us. And Chris, if you want one, you should log your interest into our website.
I think I will be doing that just when we finish.
That's good.
I have to ask, you seem well equipped for this role. You were an early adopter for EVs, of course, and seem very, very passionate about the product. But you've, in the grand scheme of things, you've not been at the company too long. Where were you before this? What was it, 14 months ago?
Yeah, I was in a domain which is not completely outside this domain, which is the grid operator domain. And I was based in Brussels, and I was the head of an association which is managing, together with the European Commission, the evolution of the electricity market design across Europe. And here, what I learned into this environment, when I was more in a position of being a technical legislator, what I learned is about this democratization of energy. What I learned about the need for flexibility from a grid point of view. And I'm really coming with a background which is a great background. And I did realize the absolute need of building a new interaction between a consumer and a grid operator. At that time, I was working particularly, for instance, with National Grid, the ESO, who was looking at also evolving certain element of its electricity market design. And that's where I found it interesting to, as a new challenge, to leverage these new EV developments, looking at anticipating these bidirectional V2G, V2H, and really try myself into a prosumer-consumer environment, because that's my passion. As you can see, I've been prototyping this in my home for 10 years. And I've experienced, I would say, more the practical consumer side through that angle. And I could send you a few pictures of my house. You'll see that I already have 7 kilowatt PV and 2 EVs and a lot of energy management trials into this environment.
So had you always been, did you start your career out in energy? Is that, what's the path you've taken to end up being, a legislator and now into this particular role?
So I'm a power system engineer by design. I've been educated as an engineer in France, and then I went through the route of Alstom and these big industries. Went through various career steps. Ended up as the head of strategy for at that time was Alstom Grid, and here this was really a worldwide responsibility. That's where I came to know the context of a lot of different markets, especially the UK, various European market. I also did work a lot in Asia. I did work a lot in the US. And at that time, as part of this role, I was also kind of following certain startups and giving support to certain startups. And that's where I came to know 5 years ago, Decibel. This was before being a legislator. And I've always been, I would say, amazed by the vision of the founder and owner of Decibel, whom I know now personally very well. So Marc-André Forget, who is definitely for me one of the best innovators whom I know into the energy space. And then from there, I went into the legislator for 5 years. The reason why I moved there is because I wanted to understand the other side of the coin, I would say, and understand basically how flows, how energy is managed, what is the rationale behind these electricity prices, the crisis, and all what we learn. And then after 5 years being a legislator, I found my background actually much more useful into the industry space. And because I did my most of my career in large group, and it has limited my amount of innovation to a certain extent, I wanted to try a new story into a startup phase. My passion is really finding solution for driving our world to net zero as quick as possible. And the reason why I picked this technology is because I am convinced, in a domain where governments are talking to each other about how can we do COP26 and all that kind of things, the solution is going to come bottom up with down to earth solution, proving real both cost saving and carbon footprint to the savings to the environment. And I think here we are in a sweet spot of an example of a solution which exists, which makes sense from an engineering point of view. Not like, hydrogen, green hydrogen, which is now the hype on everywhere, which I'm not a very big fan of because the engineering behind is a bit questionable. And here, what I want is really spend my time in maximizing the deployment of this technology because they make sense, both from a business point of view, but also from an environmental point of view.
And were you always passionate about sort of electric vehicles or solar as well, particularly? Or have you gone through, over your career, have you gone through different levels of passion for different levels of, power sources?
So that's a very good question. I actually traveled through the journey of introducing renewable into the grid. And so I was passionate about wind integration 20 years ago. Then the solar PV came. And then I was passionate about what we call smart grids, microgrids, and all these PV consumer and so on. And then came the EV, and the EV was my passion, I would say, on the last 7 years. And what I learned through this is I would say, the new energy business model. That's what I would say, the new energy business model. I think the new future energy business model is going to be peer-to-peer exchange of electricity, transaction between consumers, because they will have their own storage and cars and photovoltaics. and complementing what's happening into the wholesale, but the wholesale becoming more and more marginal from a consumer point of view, because the consumer will become more and more energy independent. And so that's really a belief which I have. And I think the economics are there. And whether governments wants to restart, nuke, and all these things, they can push, but it will end up being much more expensive than photovoltaics panels onto roof, and much more complicated to build and to receive authorization for operation.
Yeah. Most governments at the moment, I suppose, are looking at things being with the target of getting to sort of net zero globally. I think it's 2050, which seems awfully late and probably is going to miss things. I mean, we might be underwater by then. Do you think that it is going to be a consumer revolution, that it is going to come from the ground up? And are we going to be able to actually achieve net zero ahead of 2050? Or is that still a lofty goal that's just going to be missed?
So first of all, I think what is interesting is I've lived into this legislation on environment, and I did work a lot with the European Commission on trajectories on how to decarbonize Europe. And what has fascinated me through this discussion is, I think on one side, government have been helpful in trying to identify what is needed in terms of savings of CO2 and so on. Where they fail is having real solution and knowing where to incentivize certain developments. So that, I think that was one of my frustration. And at some stage, I said to myself, am I going to be helpful in reducing this carbon footprint in this position? And my response was, well, not really, because that I'm not driving any change from my side. Then when I switched into the Decibel environment, here I took the bet that actually who is going to drive the change is the youngsters, the people who are in the streets and probably in the age like yours, Chris, and who really wants, and I see it with my kids, not in your age. And my daughter said to me, well, my friends now, when they buy a car, they buy a Tesla. They don't care about these. And it's actually, Tesla is one of the only manufacturer today shipping cars on the market. So that's also why they are. And what I realized is there is a real appetite for this young generation to say, okay, you older generation have done the crap on our environment, if I may say so. We need to fix it now. And I do see, I would say, people wishing and willing to really reconsider ways of doing things. And my bet and my hope and my sincere hope is that we are going to enable a significant share of that revolution through that willingness to change. And through that willingness to invest more. So to your point about CapEx before and so on, yes, it is expensive. But what is £5,000 versus of the price of your iPhone or the price of what you buy around you for your entertainment?
Yeah, that's very true.
And so that's where we need to kind of come back to ground. What can we do? And I think we can do quite a lot with EV and photovoltaics in the home environment.
I think it's interesting what you're saying about this sort of generational thing as well, because I don't know how old you're guessing I am, but I'm 35, so I'm aiming for trying to move to more green technologies. I still have combustion cars, as it happens, and as I started my career as a racing driver, I have a passion for combustion cars. Although I am more passionate now about some of the EVs and how we're going to make those faster, frankly, is my and last longer, which is also my concern. But I have a brother who is a listener of this podcast. So hello, Stefan. And he is he's 12 years younger than me. So he's in his very early 20s and is living in a van and has a sort of desire to have photovoltaic cells on his van. So he's very much going for like how can he be as small an impact on the environment as possible, so I do think that there is even a generational shift between sort of elder millennials like myself and that sort of what is it, they're not Gen Y, is it? I can't remember what they're called now. What's the next generation? I've blanked.
Z?
Z, yeah.
Z.
Gen Z, yeah.
Yeah.
We're Gen Y, aren't we? That's right. Millennials, Gen Y. I confused myself. I was trying to use the alphabet and got wrapped up in it. So yeah, no, I think there is a huge difference, definitely. But I mean, do you think that target is going to be met, the 2050 target, or is it going to be missed, or are we going to actually beat it through like consumers?
So if we look at the math, it is feasible to meet. That's a good part, and that's what I learned really in the last 3 years. I did build a lot of trajectories and roadmap. But what is also clear is that it's going to be met if we do things now. So that's what we need to do. And what I find is a bit a pity in the current discussion of energy crisis. On one side, we have to manage the difficulty of energy poverty, and let's be honest, our technology is not going to solve the issue of energy poverty. What we also need to keep in mind is energy poor people are not the most polluting people. They are usually constrained in their living style, environment, and so on. And what we say, us in Decibel, is actually if we want to be impactful beyond this energy poverty, which we need to manage with certain incentives and so on, maybe give EVs for free to these people. If I would be government, I would look at that. And then on the other side, the one who are wealthy, the one who are actually impactful to the environment, and the one who are in the range of 20, 25 ton of CO2 emission per year, these ones should be the driver. These ones should invest. And let's be honest, £5,000 investment for these people, if they are convinced about the impact it has on the planet, it is not so much. And I think where we fail today as generally speaking, as society, is to only look at energy poverty, energy poor. Maybe it's because they are also the voters. They are more the voters of the politicians. While I think where we need to do the effort is more the mid-range, higher range of the population where the impact is more to the planet. And that's where we want to enable that change, to enable that shift with Decibel, and we are convinced it can have a snowball and so accelerate through generation like yours. My kids are 25, so maybe generation Z. And it's good to see that the generation Y is also convinced about that. And I'm not saying that we need to forget entirely about, a thermal engine for races. And so I'm not a green extremist from that point of view. I think we need to have our passion kind of developed, generally speaking, and so on. But we need to make people aware of their impact to the environment. And we need to offer them solution against mitigation of this impact and so on.
Oh, I mean, on the combustion engine, I mean, I'm a big fan of the smell of petrol and the smell of oil, but I will happily forego it if we have a planet to live on. I think that's
exactly
that's what we have to focus on. You mentioned very briefly as well the founder of Decibel. What's the brief overview of the founder? Where did they come from?
So this is Marc-André Forget, and he has a background which is not very far away from me. He's grown up from an engineering background point of view, and I think he has also a very strong legal background. He has complemented from that point of view. What I find really interesting with Marc-André is this notion. He is such an innovator. He's afraid of nothing. He's afraid of no technology barrier. And he keeps pushing and say, okay. And I can guarantee you that to come to the stage of Decibel where it is today, it has gone through at least dozens of gates, which were really challenging technical gates validation. And each time we found, I would say, challenges, barriers. And he has been continuously looking into that direction. He has been convinced of moving into that direction, and he has unlocked these barriers with technologies. And that's what I find is it is an amazing innovator point of view. He's not afraid. He's not afraid of a barrier. He's constantly looking at removing barriers, and that's why we brought this product as far as what it is today into the industrialization phase. Unfortunately, we've been hit by COVID in the last 12 months. It has been so much frustrating. But that's how it is, and we're going to, we hope, rebump in the coming few months.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and especially sort of pre-launch as well. I kind of quite like that. It'll be interesting to see how this product takes off, and hopefully it does. And I'm curious to try it out myself and see what happens with it. Have you got any final points you want to leave us with?
Just wanted to thank you for your time, your interest. I very much enjoyed the discussion. I always like interacting with people who are not necessarily coming from the same background expertise as what I am. So I very much enjoyed the interaction. So thanks a lot. And looking forward to the next step of the discussion. If you want to have a virtual visit of our first installation, we'll be very happy to do so during the summer period.
Oh, actually, that would be very cool. Maybe we can do a little live podcast.
That'd be cool.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Well, what an exciting and ambitious invention. I'm surprised something like that hasn't been done before. So it was fantastic to have Laurent enlighten us and have us be part of their mission and their launch.
Yeah. So it seems such a missed opportunity to not harness the power of the sun and use its energy to fuel our homes, even if it is a rarity here in the UK as I look out the window right now.
It is dull. Anyway, what's not dull is next week. So next week, we're proud to have on the show Nicole Schmitt, who is the founder and CEO of Flightographer, a homegrown startup that claims to be the Airbnb of holiday photographers. They have over 600 photographers across 6 continents, so an impressive feat from another powerhouse female CEO.
Wonderful.
Yeah, you can go and like us wherever you can find a button to click like. You can go and give us a 5-star review wherever you can find a place to review us and give us 5 stars. That's probably going to be Apple Podcasts. You can listen to us wherever you get podcasts, which you've probably already figured that out by now as you've got this far. You can actually email us at hello@thattech.show, and you can go to the website, which is thattech.show, and you can check out all of the other 50 plus episodes that we've got up on there as well.
Okay. Speak to you next week.
Okay, bye.